next up, we have a very interesting presentation from Evan Hall, uh, who might or might not share a screen, but Evan, you can, just so you know. It's the project to preserve chimneys of historic Palisades homes. And I think Evan will explain to us what the project is and why he's here. And so, Evan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sue. Hi, everybody. It's good to see some familiar faces. Quentin, Lori, Jessica, Daphne, and some others. So for those that don't know me, my name is Evan Hall. I'm the founding director of House Museum, which is a nonprofit that works to revitalize vacant or blighted historic landmarks. So we work with artists and architects and preservationists to discover new solutions for creating cultural activities or programs around historic sites. So I'm going to just share my screen and get into this presentation. Tell me if you guys can see this.
Yes, I can see it.
Yeah. So, well, I'll start by saying that I am a Los Angeles native. I am not a Palisades resident, although I do remember celebrating my 6th birthday at Will Rogers State Park. It was car themed, but since then I've enjoyed many days of hiking on Inspiration Loop and of course driving through the PCH. So as soon as the fires broke out, it was devastating for all of us, for all of Los Angeles, and I actually did have to evacuate as the fire approached Mulholland Drive towards Encino. But I'll say that as soon as the fires really broke out, me and my team began thinking, how do we help? How do we use our expertise as artists and architects to create something that can produce hope and something that can inspire not just the Palisadians, but also others that have gone through similar disasters or crisis. And so we developed this initiative to preserve some of the historic chimneys that have survived from the Palisades Fire. So we've identified, excuse me, this is a slide about House Museum. Again, it's a 501c3 nonprofit organization that's run purely by volunteer labor. So we were watching the progression of the fire very closely, knowing that there were historic properties in the Palisades designed by master architects, including Paul R. Williams, Lloyd Wright, Eric Lloyd Wright, and Richard Neutra, among others. And so we created this list of about 65 properties and began as early as we could conducting ground surveys to be able to see which ones were still standing or in what states of disrepair they had succumbed to. And so during our surveys, we photographed and documented all of the chimneys that were still standing. And we followed the California Historic Preservation Ordinance for their designation standard in terms of what qualifies something as being of historical significance. And one of those standards, right, is that a place has been associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of California's history and cultural heritage. Another criteria 2, is that some of these properties are associated with the lives of persons that are important in our past, right? Some of those people include Anthony Quinn, the actor, the legendary actor, as well as other living actors like Anthony Hopkins. But we began doing this research immediately and actually built our research off of prior research that had been conducted by the Los Angeles Conservancy, who is a partner with us and supporter of this initiative. And so we have been monitoring the status of these structures Of course, at this point, we're in May and the debris removal is set to be completed. They say as early as June, but we know it will likely be a little bit later, right? But we're kind of at the point where we are seeing less chimneys than we saw within those first weeks and months after the devastation. So just a couple of stories. So one of the properties that we've identified on Bienvenida was owned by the Sofers. And there was an article that ran in relationship to this project by Laura Hertzfeld. And she wrote, Sofer grew up in the Palisades in a house designed by Frank Lloyd Wright's grandson, Eric. And then he responds, he says, "We moved there when I was 6 years old," says Sofer, who is now in his 60s. His mother, the historian Reba Sofer, lived in the house until the Palisades Fire destroyed it. Sofer described the room that featured the chimney, now all that is left of the historic house. The fireplace in the study, that's where my mom wrote books, where she worked. It was the heart of her intellectual world. The whole room was walnut, all the desks and shelves and cabinetry built in, and this brick fireplace in the center of one of the walls that lent to its warmth, right? So, we've seen that oftentimes the only thing that's remaining or intact is these masonry structures, right? The bricks that have already been through fire, right, in order to hold their form. And so the Sofers describe their chimney as being an integral part of their living space, right? Something that almost united the living room and the intellectual world of Reba Sofer. And they continue to say that the concept, which I will fully share as we go through the next couple of slides, is one that Eric Lloyd Wright would have loved. Anytime anyone can take art and combine it with culture and history to make a memorial that will sit in nature, it's a great idea. So we are working to not just preserve these structures. They've already been cataloged and documented. Some have been 3D scanned, but we are in the process of relocating. The goal is 7, right? And once those 7 are relocated, then we have plans and vision, right, to create a memorial of freestanding chimneys and fireplaces that will act as a place for gathering, a place for reflection, a place for healing, a place for community that is constructed of the remnants and the relics of the former homes and dwelling places of these Palisadian residents. Another one of the homes that we've identified is located on Monument Street, and this property was designed by the famous architect Richard Neutra, who studied under Frank Lloyd Wright, and he designed over 300 properties in his lifetime. And as you can see on the left, that's the chimney as it stands currently. Just a month ago. And then you have a photograph of the interior of the home that was taken in 1954 with the chimney lit with fire beneath it. And then on the right, you see one of Richard Neutra's original drawings that was produced around 1950. And Richard Neutra, right, he is a celebrated architect, and there's actually 3 of his properties that burned in the fire. Just a few months ago, but he was celebrated by Times Magazine in 1949, and he got the cover. So, what the architecture in the Palisades, right, is not just important to the Palisades, it's important for Los Angeles, and it's actually important for the international architectural world and design community. Just have a sip of water. And so one of the other properties that I'll share about was located on El Medio Avenue, and it was designed by architect Ray Kappe in 1959. Kappe, excuse that typo, founded the architectural program at Cal Poly Pomona and the Southern California Institute of Architecture, also known as SCI-Arc. And he worked with the Erdley family on this property. Um, and, uh, and as you can see in the photograph on the right, there's a portrait, a family portrait of the Erdleys in front of their Ray Kappe fireplace, which has these kind of characteristic and diagnostic concrete blocks that he used in multiple homes that he designed. And then I just want to share also a quote from Bridget Nicole Grice, who is the founder of the Pacific Palisades Preservation Coalition. She was supposed to be on here tonight, but she's traveling in France and could not make it. But she stated in this article, when you think about a chimney and you think about the history of it, it goes back to this idea of the hearth. And I think the hearth has always been this place for storytelling, for gathering, and for community, right? And so if we are building, if our goal is to build a place for gathering and for community that is outdoors and involves public art, what better place than to gather people around the fireplace and around the hearth? So after identifying these over 65 structures, we began conducting outreach to specialists that could relocate safely these unreinforced masonry structures, right? Which has actually never been done before. Nobody's ever moved this many freestanding chimneys, but we got the support of the Masonry Contractors Association of California and America, California Masonry Council. We're working with architect Jack Hilbrand, who's designed and worked on many properties in Malibu, and he's based in Santa Monica, and he's well acquainted with fire-resistant building materials and sustainable building materials. And we brought on board a general contractor, Captive Conservation and Preservation. And so we've developed various work plans for each of these chimneys. They all require a different method for relocation. Some have to be disassembled and cut into sections and then craned and then crated and then lifted, right, crated and then placed onto flatbed trucks. I'm not a structural engineer or an architect or a construction manager, but from all of our conversations, I have a better understanding of actually how challenging it is to relocate an unreinforced masonry structure, which is why we've consulted so many specialists on this. Which is why we've consulted so many specialists on this. But we have, at this point, assembled a task force that is able to do this relocation work, not only the disassembly, but also the reassembly. And so our goal, like I said in the beginning, is to produce a permanent place of remembrance, healing, and hope. And this is a very simplified version of what this could look like, right? But the idea is that these relics of architectural history, cultural history, family legacy, that they would be repurposed, that they would take on a new life and be accessible to not only the future residents of the Palisades, but those that are not going to be able to rebuild and those that are leaving. And in a conversation that I had actually with Anne Sweeney, who's on the board of the Getty, I was telling her that, for some of these homeowners that are in our program, they're 85-year-old women, right? That widowed women that don't have the bandwidth to go through the rebuild process. And so in our conversations, it's felt like the preservation of their chimney is like a parting gift that they're giving to the Palisades that tells the next generation that they were here, that they contributed to the culture of the neighborhood, the town, and so that they're not forgotten, So
That's great, Evan. That's such an interesting project. I mean, I would have never dreamt anything.
yes, this is the last slide.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you, sorry. And then there's just other presidents, right? Chris Burden's Urban Light, Stonehenge, and the 9/11 Memorial. So our goal, right, is to salvage these 7 structures before May 31st. The Army Corps has given us a deadline, an extension or kind of hold on certain addresses that they won't clear before May 31st. So we are working around the clock to do this work. We're actively fundraising and building additional partnerships to be able to execute this work efficiently. But we are seeking an endorsement from the Pacific Palisades Community Council to move forward with this as we petition the Mountains and Recreation Conservation Authority for public land for this memorial, right, which could be which ideally would be somewhere in the Santa Monica mountain range. Thank you all. I hope that this resonated with you, and I hope that you all can vote quickly as we need a place to put the disassembled structures as we prepare to reassemble them. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Kimberly Bloom has a question for you.
Yes, thank you so much. And it's really a terrific project, Evan. Thank you very, very much. I'm wondering if at the Methodist church, I was not a Methodist. I've only been in that church a few times, but does anybody know if that had a fireplace and it's still standing? Because the Methodists were the one that started Pacific Palisades. And I mean, they are the reason that Pacific Palisades existed. And if they had a chimney, that could be super interesting historically. So if anybody knows if the Methodists had a chimney, maybe you might want to check that out.
Yeah, we could ask Chuck Hart. He's dealing with the Methodist Church for sure. Chris?
Yeah, thank you for this great presentation, Evan. Have you been in touch with the Historic Society, which is a member of our board?
Yeah. So we're members of the Pacific Palisades Preservation Coalition. We've been on multiple meetings with them, although I know that their bandwidth is a bit shorter, right, in terms of taking on new projects. But yeah, we have been in meetings with them.
Right, because I would assume they may know of other historic homes or structures, like, for example, the Methodist Church. But
Yeah.
it sounds like you've been exploring that, so that's good. Thanks.
Thank you.
And Evan, if you end up finding a good place, you'll let us know, right?
Yes.
Can I chime in? Evan, I just want
Yes.
to say I'm blown away by your presentation. I love history. I love that you respect, and we have such a deep history in the Palisades with so many, you're right, artists, writers, actors, everything, architects. I love your project. I find it really profound. Is the Getty Center, would they be open to doing something there?
We're in conversation with them. They are limited. I mean, the arts and cultural sectors across the nation are being hit very, very hard right now. So they've been informed about the project. They have offered to give us consultants from their conservators. But that's, who knows if that's the extent of what they can offer at this moment, but we're exploring.
So, and what's your biggest, what do you need? Like, do you need the place or do you need the money or both?
Both.
Yeah. In a nutshell.
Good
Okay,
enough.
Sue Pasco.
Methodist Church is entirely raised. There's nothing left there. They are saving the cross. It was on the top of the church, and there's also a cement structure, another cross inside, but the entire church is raised, so you don't need to ask the Methodist.
Okay, thank you. Dave Card?
Just quickly, I may have missed it, but is there a chimney to save at Will Rogers' house?
There are 3 beautiful chimneys that are constructed of rustic creek stones. They're amazing, but the Will Rogers Ranch Foundation is holding on to their chimneys, for good reason. I think that they're planning on rebuilding around, or they have their own plans.
Thank you.
Sharon?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, have you been in contact with Randy Young? He's like our historian of the Palisades.
I have not. No, I don't know Randy.
yeah, you should really get in contact with him. They're having an event at Rustic Canyon Park on May 18th from 3 to 5, and they're going to do a lot of the history stuff. It's going to be a get together. If you can attend that, I would show up or try to contact Randy Young because he'll really help you with this project. This is right up his alley.
Yeah, Evan, Brandy is part of the Historical Society as
Yeah.
well.
Okay,
Thank you,
Okay.
Sharon. Evan,
Very
thank
good.
you so much.
thank you.
It's great. It's great that we finally got your presentation, and we'll be chatting about it. So thank you.